Advisors of Earth, how are you? Kyle, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. So for those of you who are new to this show, welcome to Talking Wealth. And for those of you who have seen us before, welcome back. All right, here's what we're talking about today. RIAs have evolved from mom and pop storefronts to genuine bona fide businesses. And a huge part of that evolution has been powered by technology, lots of technology, which has obviously a lot of upsides. But one of the downsides to that is we as advisors are using, in many cases, a dozen companies or more to perform all sorts of various functions across our firm. And with our information spread out all over the place, we have lost, I don't know if we ever had, the ability to really analyze our data across platforms and see what is going on. And if a business can't effectively measure what counts, then obviously it has all sorts of negative knock-on effects. And that's where MileMarker comes in. So on today's show, I'm joined by Kyle Van Pelt, who is the co-founder, to talk about how advisors can make sure that we are able to capture and analyze all of our data to ensure that our businesses operate as efficiently as possible. And I'm excited to get into all of that with Kyle. But first, a word from our sponsor. Today's show is sponsored by Grayscale. Curious about investing in crypto? Not sure where to start? Start with Grayscale. They are the world's largest crypto native asset manager and has been in crypto since 2013. That is a long time when you consider how early we still are in crypto adoption. They offer the widest selection of crypto investment products in the US, over 30 different funds for investors to choose from. That is plenty of choice for both first-time crypto investors or experts. Many of their funds are available right in your investment or retirement account, so you don't have to go through the hassle of setting up a crypto exchange account or a wallet. Think crypto, invest Grayscale. Investing involves risk, including loss of principal. For more information, visit grayscale.com. All right, Kyle. So we've spoken in the past about MileMarker and what you all are doing. And as a young company, like every young company, sometimes finding the right language, the right mission statement, the right way to connect, especially with what you're doing, is tricky. Yeah. And so the last time we spoke, I said, hang on, pause. I got it. It's all clicking now. Stop talking. I want to do this live on the camera, and I want to have a genuine first-time reaction. So yeah, here we are.
Yeah, Bill O'Reilly, let's do it live. We'll do it live, Batnick. I love it, man, and I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come on the show and talk about it.
Yeah. So here's how I see it. As I mentioned earlier, like we have just systems all over the place, and thank God we have Nick Majuli here, who is able to extract and stitch together and give us reports. But it is a pain in the ass. I know most RAs don't have the luxury of having a data scientist on staff. And like I said in the intro, if you can't really measure what you're working on, it's really hard to execute on a high level. And most of these companies don't talk to each other. There's no connectivity. So what is an advisor to do?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we got to go back a little bit, right? So just as like quick, I'm not gonna tell my whole life story, but I got my start in this space at Riskalyze when they were going through hypergrowth, and one of my jobs was to build partnerships and to build integrations, and so that was my first foray into why this is such a challenge. And basically 10 years later, the challenge still exists, which is people are building all of this cool technology, but yet you still have advisors saying it doesn't talk to each other the way I need it to talk to each other. And I spent a lot of time trying to get back to the first principles of why that is the case. And I have kind of two thoughts on what that is. Number one, what our industry sells, the product is advice, and advice is inherently subjective. Like if you took a family and you sat them across the table from the 5 best advisors that you could think of, I mean, just true A+ incredible advisors, there is a good chance that family, that household would get 5 different pieces of advice or ways that they could approach what they should do with their wealth. Cool. I mean, it's personal finance for a reason. When you bring that down to a technology, what that means is there's no one way to build all of these things. There's no one way to stitch them all together. That makes it really, really difficult, like you were saying. So how do we change this? And the concept that I had was you need to stop trying to integrate products and you just need to integrate the data, because then you allow firms to be able to do things with that data, whatever they want to, and not wait in the queue of what's going to happen. The other thing tangentially is the pace of innovation is so fast right now, and the desire and the need for more and more services, right? Like, so even for Ritholtz, how many years ago was it like when you guys brought on something that to do with like estate planning stuff or tax planning, like a Holista plan or a wealth.com or whatever, right? We weren't using these things a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah.
So in the past couple of years, the desire for a service from an RIA is just going up and up and up. You guys need to do estate planning. You need to do tax planning. You need to do stock option planning. You got to do executive comp planning. You've got, I mean, it's just growing, right? And I know people listening to this probably feel the same way. So capitalism's great. People are building technology to meet these needs. Awesome. But your firm is run off of these incumbent pieces of tech too, you know, whether it's portfolio accounting or CRM or whatever. So we ran into this car crash of all of these new solutions are getting built, but the line out the door to integrate with the platforms that have distribution and that have, you know, the incumbency, it's crazy. So I've been at places where it was minimum 6 months before we could integrate, quote unquote, one of these hot new pieces of tech, no matter how much people were asking us for it. Everybody, we want to integrate this new piece of tech. You can't do it. It's 6+ months. Also, the incumbents are acquiring tech left and right, and they're trying to stitch it together, but you're getting these redundant experiences, and you are getting, I don't want to knock on anybody, but it's not the best client. It's not the best experience either, because you're trying to stitch it all together. It doesn't integrate even when you own it. So what do you do? So we've been thinking about this a ton. The answer, in my opinion, is you have to integrate all of the data, and then you have to allow the firm to do what you want. So we kind of have this graphic that we could pull up, but you know, I mean, your thoughts on that, like as you're growing an RIA, like what does that look like for you with all of the new stuff coming out, the stuff that's demanding, and you probably see more tech than anybody?
Try it off, please, for a sec. So what does it look like? It's painful because a lot of the incumbents are not built on the technology that is available today that allows for this sort of stuff. And there are all sorts of conflicts and pieces of technology that don't want to play nice with each other. We haven't even mentioned the custodians and their involvement in all of this. So you need a person, a team. And I think, let's be honest, I think that depending on the size of the business, the RIA, most of them just don't have the time or the resources or the expertise to even begin to do this. And it's kind of crazy because on the one hand, yes, our core function is to give the client advice. But at the same time, for a lot of us, we are running a business. And if you can't really measure some things like, okay, if we have 40 advisors, what does this advisor's process look like in terms of call 1 through call whatever it is? How long is it between call 1 and 2? How long between the initial conversation and the closing? How long between we get the verbal and we get the account open, that we get them traded? And how does that look across not just the advisors, but middle office and back office? And we know this by talking to them, but we can't really measure it, which is crazy. No businesses are ran this way. We are sort of flying blind.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think too, you're also hitting on one other thing, which is this trend of, it's been around for a while, but the concept of an enterprise RIA, where the enterprise has to have its own stack of technology that you're running things off of. Most common, what we see is they're running off of Salesforce and a couple of other things. But then those 40 advisors you talked about might be using Redtail or Wealthbox or some combination of other things. Well, why would Redtail and Salesforce integrate with each other? They both view each other as competitors. So the platform that the enterprise is running off of, or the firm, is different than what the advisors are using out there, which also makes it really hard to measure, because you want to run reports or you want to run dashboards for that process you were talking about inside of Salesforce, but all of the data the advisor is running off of is in Wealthbox or Redtail or something else like that. Now we have another problem. And some of that other data you're looking at too is in 3, 4, 5 different platforms. So like, yeah, this is a great conversation to have around how do we fix that? And I do, go ahead.
Can we throw your graphic back on? I don't want to gloss over that because that was sort of the part that really clicked for me. So talk us through this. What are we looking at?
Yeah. So I always think about that Michael Kitces map that came out, or that's out all the time. And I think it was just 2 or 3 years ago, there was
Dude, it's like an atlas now.
It's crazy. It is. It's an atlas. 3 years ago, there was 180 companies on there. Now there's over 450. And they're saying that projections are it's going to be like north of 600 very shortly. But the problem is, while he's done an incredible job of separating those out into financial planning or portfolio accounting or all in one, or go check out MileMarker on the data warehousing side, it just doesn't tell the whole story. So I really tried to think about, what do these firms have to do all day? And when I think about a firm like Ritholtz, you've got these 3 buckets, and this is what you're talking a little bit about. But the first bucket for technology is, what do advisors do every day? And I call this advice creation. So advice creation is the advisor getting to their desk, sitting across from a client, and they have to look at, how is the financial plan performing, or we have to create a financial plan. And then based off of what's going on with those things, we are going to propose recommendations on what we should do to make that plan perform better or fit better for what the client needs or the prospect needs. So that's what advisors do every single day. If we bring that graphic back up, the second bucket is the advisor as the client, or this is what I call advice execution. So most RIAs today have this infrastructure where the advisor is creating advice, but then they are delivering what they create into the infrastructure they work with. So at Ritholtz, you have this incredible team where the advisor can come up with something. Maybe they want to open an account. Maybe they want to make a trade. Maybe they have a request. They can send that into this engine you all have built to execute that advice. The analogy that I use for this sometimes would be that of like a really great restaurant. So the advisors are the front of house staff. They're serving the clients who are sitting at the table. They're taking the order. They're figuring out what the client wants to eat. And then they have to figure out how to go bring that back to the kitchen, which is the efficiency machine that is made to create consistent dishes every single time that can be delivered to create a great client experience. So Ritholtz has this whole infrastructure that is advice execution. You have, all of your advisors around the country, they're sending things into the mothership. You guys are executing a lot of stuff for them because they should be focused on spending time with clients, creating advice, and doing all of that. Okay, awesome. That's what the modern RIA looks like today in many ways. But then you have this third bucket, which is, as you were saying, we're trying to run a business. So how do I get an aggregate view of all of the advice creation and advice execution happening across my firm or across my business at any given time? So we can pull this down for a second. That is the crux of this whole problem. If you're running an RIA, the average workflow to answer one of those questions is, you have some Excel wizard, or, if you don't have a Nick who's a data scientist, there's some person, whenever I ask people, they always have a name. So if you're on the chat and you're an RIA, drop the name of your Excel wizard that you have at your firm, because I'm sure that there's a name for that person. But they've got to export data from portfolio management, from CRM, from QuickBooks or Sage Intacct or something. They got to create pivot tables and VLOOKUPs and all of this type of stuff. And then they've got to do all of this work to bring it to Michael to answer a simple question. And then you go, oh, this is great, but what about this? And it's like they're back to the drawing board. The data's stale. It's a challenge. So for me, the way you solve this is we've kind of joked a little bit, but it's data lake summer. So we are pulling the data from everything on the Kitsis map, from anything outside of the Kitsis map. We pull it all into one place. And that's how you integrate data instead of products. But then our secret sauce is we've figured out how to pull data out of the warehouse into a beautiful UI so that you can get answers to any questions about advice creation, advice execution, or the aggregate view of either of those.
So for the RIAs out there, there is literally no limit on the number of permutations of different software that advisors can be using. So I would imagine that in the initial conversation with MileMarker all the way through to execution, it's probably not a light lift, which is fine because this is very important stuff. How do you guys execute on this, and how much of a lift is it for the operation team and the advisors end to get this up and running? Like, what does that whole process look like?
Yeah, it's gotten easier and easier. So I'm proud to say that this is something where we've invested a lot of our time and a lot of our effort is how do we make this as simple as possible, because it can feel overwhelming. We have one firm that went from their kickoff call with us to live metrics and analytics for them in 17 days.
Wow.
So, and that was combining data from 3 different sources. And they were able to use all of this to tell a valuation story to a potential capital partner.
Hang on, 3 different sources. Those are rookie numbers.
Well, that was to get valuation metrics, right? So now they're on to the next side of things. Now we also have some people where it can take 30 to 60 days where they're putting together, 6, 8, 10 sources, but it's all based off of what data are you looking to figure out, right? So I've had advisors come to me and, no shame to anybody if this is your scenario, but they've said, Kyle, I have CRMs. I have this, one of the hardest questions for me to answer is how many clients do I have in the state of Kentucky, right? If I go to one advisor out in the field, they can probably tell me how many clients they have, but to get an aggregate view of all of the clients I have in the state of Kentucky across my enterprise, that is a much more cumbersome task than you would think.
Yeah. So this is a great point. We are hiring for an advisor in our MFO offering. And I said to Nick, hey, how many clients do we have that are over X amount of dollars? That is exactly the type of easy thing that I should just have a dashboard that I don't need, Nick, that I could just go, boop.
Right. And look at that. And now Nick has, what do you think the workflow looks like for Nick to go and figure out that question?
I think Nick has to go to Salesforce, type in some sort of query. And for Nick, it's probably pretty easy, but I don't know. What do you think? I have no idea.
Most of the time it is, if it requires a query, advisor shouldn't be doing it. That's kind of my one-liner for this, right? Which is nobody got into this business to be technologists. Nobody got into this business to hire data engineers and all of this type of stuff. But with the way the world's going, you need the power of all of that. And that's why MileMarker is the partner for you, because we provide end-to-end data engineering, query, data lake, all of that stuff. You get the power of that without having to worry about becoming an expert in that or how to manage those people or how to hire them.
Does MileMarker have the ability to look backwards, or is it only point of execution on a go-forward basis?
We can look as far back historically as you ever want to.
Okay. Wow. All right. So what are some of the most common things that you are building for advisors? Let's talk about a few of those key features.
Yeah, there's a couple things. So the way we always start is with, the executive use case. So that kind of third circle of how do I get an aggregate view of everything happening across my business?
So you're talking to the founders generally?
Most of the time we're talking to founders. Yeah. And they'll bring in a COO or something like that, but it's always that person, maybe they've made an acquisition or two and they're going, wow, this really created kind of a mess from a data perspective. And I need to get a grasp on this. Even further, if they have capital partners, now those capital partners want reporting back in on how are these firms performing, which ones are doing well, what can we learn from, how are we getting ROI on our investment? And it's really cumbersome to put together reports for people like that. So that's normally where we start, and they're coming in and they want to get high-level views of what are our net new flows, because they're trying to actually measure organic growth. How are we growing outside of the market? Are we actually bringing on new clients? What is the average number of assets for those new clients we're bringing on? What do the demographics look like for our firm? Are they trending in the right direction, or do we have an entire book of people who are taking RMDs and slowly the assets are going to be dwindling because everybody's into accumulation?
And I would assume that you could drill down to the advisor level.
Oh yeah, we can go so we have the looks right now of overall view of the entire firm. We can go down to specific offices, if you want to call it that. So maybe the San Diego office versus the Dallas office, down to individual advisors, or we can do diamond teams or whatever it is that you want on that side.
So you are providing key insights to the business owners.
Yes. Profitability per client is another big one. So, hey, advisor, you're bringing on a whole bunch of new households. That's incredible. But the average fee schedule for these is 37 basis points. And, you've got a team that's going to serve them and all of that's well and good, but these aren't profitable relationships. So yeah, it makes the organic growth number look good, but AUM is not everything. Revenue is what actually matters, because that's how we pay the bills around here.
You mentioned, and I don't want to get too far away from some of the key features, but this is an important one. You mentioned M&A and the enterprise RIAs of the world, of which they are getting bigger, faster, stronger. Does MileMarker have the ability to show them metrics? Let's just assume that the advisor is either signed or in serious diligence, or the acquiring RIA or the acquiree. Can you see the metrics of the business that you are acquiring? What does that look like?
So right now you can't do a pre look at that. So this is something we're trying to explore, which is a very technical term, but we call it like a proxy data lake that, if you are in deep enough with them, you could send them an instance of MileMarker. We could sync in some of the data so that you could almost have a data room, if you will, to look at some of the metrics. But that doesn't exist today as it is. But what we see with a lot of M&A is they might not use the same tech stack that you do. So, okay, now we know we're going to have a conversion project on our hand, and it's going to take a while for us to be able to get to revenue, to build, to do all of these sort of things. Well, on top of the analytics thing, one of the big pieces that we're seeing people provide is a firm-specific advisor workstation, if you will. And what this means is it runs off of the data no matter what the data source is. So for people who are acquiring, this is really powerful because let's just say it's the Ritholtz advisor portal that we have. And then I acquire a firm that uses a completely different tech stack. But I just plug their portfolio accounting data into the data lake and it powers the advisor experience we have. So you can give everybody you just acquired the same experience as the people that are using, what you have today while you work on a conversion underneath for efficiency, or you can let them run on the same tech that they want the whole time.
Man, when you lose your train of thought?
Yeah, I've been there before.
That happens to me way more often than I would like.
I've been there before. I'll say this really quick while you're pulling it back together. I think in M&A, what we're seeing is, so people have talked about being multi-custodian for a really long time, and that brings its own problems to the space that it is. But what people don't talk about enough either is that more and more firms are multi-platform now. So what do you do when you're multi-platform, when you have multiple portfolio accounting solutions? And Black Diamond looks at the data differently than Orion looks at the data differently than Adipar looks at the data. And you're trying to run an enterprise firm and they all call a net new flow a different thing. What do you do about that? So everybody's faced with the choice today of, do we remain multi-platform and not make the operations teams that have gotten really accustomed to using these solutions mad? Or do we go through the exercise of getting everybody onto one tech stack, which is pain for everybody involved? And that inherently creates a bottleneck with how fast you can acquire firms, by the way, because you have a whole team there that has a bottleneck of, if I acquire, 7 firms this year and they all require conversions, you're going to have a disgruntled team on your staff trying to figure out how to convert all these things. The data lake solves this because I can pull the data from all of those. You can be multi-platform and get whatever analytics you want across all of those data sources without any problem.
This update's daily?
Yeah, it depends. So some of it's daily. Orion, we have basically real-time data streaming with them. So if it happens in Orion, I can see it in MileMarker, within seconds. With certain other ones, this sounds fancy, but we have bots that will look basically every 15 minutes for any changes that have happened to the data, and we'll refresh it back into the data warehouse. So we're trying to keep it as close to real time as possible for anybody who's using this.
Can you do things like show me clients that have more than 2% cash balance or more than $200,000 in cash in their account?
Yes. And yeah, that's a pretty common use case actually for people. So that's pretty simple.
All right. So once it's up and running, who is the person that is responsible for owning the technology? Is it the COO? Are the advisors using it? Is it the founders who are getting, can you build reports for the founders? I know I just asked you 3 questions, but go ahead.
No, it's great because the answer is yes to all of those. So we have some of our clients that they run their executive Monday morning staff meeting and MileMarker is up on the TV and they run the entire staff meeting from MileMarker because we can show them what their forecasted revenue is supposed to be based off of if you ran billing today. They're looking at profitability numbers. They're looking at a bunch of stuff and they're going, all right, we got to make some decisions here. We're looking at all the reports from MileMarker. We have some firms that do compensation analytics reporting with us where advisors want to know how much they're going to be paid after their splits and after their fees and after their this and after their that. So we're combining accounting data with all of the other data, the split data, and we give advisors a dashboard that they can come in and in live time see what would I be paid if my payouts were to come today. And that makes the CFO's life really, really happy.
Okay, so let's go deeper on that. What if I want to do some real business analytics above and beyond just the advisor part of it, but I want to look at my bottom line stuff. So we're talking about pulling in rent and all technology costs and everything else that you could think about for cash flow projections. Is that something that you guys can do or work on, or is that outside the scope?
So I would assume that your rent and all of those costs would live in something like QuickBooks or Sage Intacct or your general ledger software, right? So we work with a majority of firms right now to pull in all of that accounting data, all their expense data, all everything. Most of them are trying to map that back to what expenses can be directly tied to an advisor's, expense profile, so that, if we're sharing expenses or something like that. But the use case you just described would almost be easier for us because you're not having to tie each expense back to an advisor ID. If we need to look at, all right, what's our overall expenses next to what our projected revenue is, because that's not in QuickBooks or Sage Intacct, and we want to make some decisions around this, we absolutely could help you with that.
So Michael had a report. Michael Kitces had a report showing advisor profitability in the most efficient team. And it's an advisor, it's a co-pilot, and it's a CSA. If we wanted to run financial analytics on different structures within the firm, is that super complicated to do?
As long as so if you have the logic on what you would want to figure out there, right? We can put it together. So we have a firm that runs everything on diamond teams, but you might have a client service account or a client service associate that serves multiple diamond teams. So, you want to figure out who's being the most productive as a CSA or something like that for these teams and how we make them successful. So yes, you can look at analytics from the advisor perspective, from a co-pilot perspective, from a client service associate perspective, in regions for different types of demographics, because maybe the advisor you have in Chicago works way better with people who have asset ranges from 750K to 1.7 million. But for some reason, when you get above 2 million, their productivity goes down. Maybe they get intimidated. Maybe there's something there that you don't know. But you can start to say, okay, everybody who comes in with 800K, we want to feed them to these types of people because they really thrive with this. The client experience is better versus just round robin them or, it's by territory or it's by this or whatever else.
What are some of the most common questions or requests that you're hearing from your clients? What do they want?
So a lot of it is being able to slice and dice things. So I'm thinking of a client right now that, they have a lot of business in Texas. They wanted to see what was the percentage of their business or assets that came from specific states, and then what the demographics were of those clients in each state.
Why did they want that?
They wanted to see, number one, they grow pretty quickly, but they're trying to figure out, what type of growth are we bringing in? Is it profitable growth? Do we want to be too over-indexed in one specific place or not? Strategically, and should we hire more people there? Should we get a bigger office space there? All of those different types of things. Because when you just look at a large AUM bucket, it all looks the same. But what if all of it's coming into one place? You want to be able to deploy your dollars and be a capital allocator well there. But I'm going to actually take you on a different side of this, because we've been talking a ton about analytics. I want to tell you about another one of our clients that when they started with us, they told us on the phone, they said, we are all in on Orion and Salesforce. Our business runs off of Orion and Salesforce, and we have some ninjas that are incredible with this piece of technology. But we don't ever want our advisors to see or log into either of those pieces of technology. Never. We don't want it. So they built out an advisor portal with us where they can do all kinds of things. And when they came to us, they were at $2.5 billion in AUM, and they were growing pretty quickly. In less than 3 years, they went from $2.5 billion to over $8 billion in AUM, with no acquisitions, by the way, organic growth of those people, because they allowed those advisors to focus. They didn't have to log into 8 different platforms anymore or anything. They aggregated and pulled everything into one place. They have a really simple way to take action and send requests back into that infrastructure where the people are ninjas with Orion and Salesforce and everything. And they created so much efficiency with how business is being processed and transacted that they've grown like crazy. And so then you look at everything happening there and you pull that into executive analytics of like, all right, well, how is that working? Why are we converting people better? The more leads that we bring in, where do we send them? Where do we route them?
Yeah, amazing. All right, we have a question in the chat from Jacob. Does this solve for partial integration between tech? We have tech that claims to integrate, but may only have a one-way data sync or not sync all data points with the standard integration.
Yeah, I love this question. So we have a firm that came to us that's similar story. Hey, I have Orion and Salesforce integrated and the app is solid, but there's these 6 things that I can't get out of Orion that I need to send to Salesforce for my trading team to be able to, do what they need to do. Can you guys help me with that? And the answer is yes. So we pull all of the data down from Orion into the warehouse. We have all of the data from Salesforce, including custom objects, custom fields, whatever it is. We were able to do the calculations and marry it the way we needed to. And then we delivered that data into Salesforce for that firm. So they had a complete integration, if you will. So MileMarker is a wonderful solution. If you don't want to do analytics or you don't want to do all these sort of things, but you're just like, there's data right here that I know exists and I want it to show up over here, but the integration between these firms doesn't solve that. MileMarker is a great solution for that.
All right, Kyle, last question from me. I would imagine that you have the ability for executives to create custom reports that they want every Monday.
Yes. Oh yeah. I mean, so I'm not trying to knock on anybody, but there's a lot of firms out there that can do custom queries, but the line is, we have a client that asked for a custom query and it was 6 months and they had still not received the custom query from the firm that they were working with. We will deliver a custom query for you in 6 minutes. So we can build any report across all of those data and anything that you want, that you could ask for. So you talked about, you have Nick, right? Most firms don't have Nick. They don't have anybody who's technical enough to do this type of stuff. So imagine if you could have the power of somebody that you wanted to ask a question to and get the answer back, lickety split. MileMarker's the partner for you there.
Lickety split. You don't hear that word too often these days. All right, Kyle, well done. This is obviously, I say all the time, this is not 2013 anymore. There are not a lot of gaps in the advisor's tech stack. In fact, there's no gaps. There's too much, way too much tech. But this is one that sorely needs to be filled. So wish you all the best at filling this gap. For people that want to learn more about MileMarker, how do they find you?
Yeah, check us out, milemarker.co. That's our website. Come check out our podcast, The Next Mile, where we interview advisors and we talk about what's going on with their tech stack every single day. And then, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't say we're going to be at Future Proof. We're bringing Data Lake Summer to Future Proof, so come check us out there.
All right, man. Really appreciate the time. Great job. Advisors, thank you for tuning in. We will be back next Wednesday to talk M&A. I am super excited to dive into that topic. So we'll see you there. Hope everybody enjoys the rest of their week, and thank you for tuning in. Bye.